The email notification pinged on my computer screen during a particularly boring Tuesday afternoon. Annual Secret Santa Exchange. Assignments inside. I clicked it open with the same mixture of excitement and mild dread I felt every December when our office organized this tradition. The $25 limit was reasonable, but picking the perfect gift always stressed me out more than it should. I scrolled down to find my assigned name, and my stomach dropped slightly when I saw it. Jessica Hartley. Of course. Out of 47 people in our marketing department, I'd been assigned the one person who measured everything by its price tag. Jessica was the coworker who wore designer labels to casual Fridays, who parked her luxury sedan in the prime spot every morning, and who made sure everyone knew exactly how much she'd spent on her weekend shopping trips. We weren't enemies, exactly, but we existed in completely different worlds despite working 20 feet apart. I lived paycheck to paycheck in a modest apartment, cooking dinner at home and saving for emergencies. Jessica lived in a downtown condo and posted Instagram stories from expensive restaurants 3 times a week. The $25 limit would be nothing to her, but it represented a significant chunk of my discretionary budget. I spent the next 2 weeks agonizing over what to get Jessica. Every lunch break, I browsed stores and websites, searching for something that would feel thoughtful within my tight budget. Everything Jessica normally gushed about cost hundreds of dollars: designer scarves, expensive perfumes, luxury skincare products. The $25 limit suddenly felt impossibly small. Then, during a random scroll through old work photos on our company's shared drive, I found it. A picture from last year's team-building retreat, the one weekend when Jessica had actually seemed relaxed and genuine. We'd all gone kayaking, and there was this perfect candid shot of Jessica laughing, her usual polished facade replaced by pure joy. I remembered that day. She talked about how much she loved being on the water, how it reminded her of childhood summers at her grandmother's lake house. It was the most real conversation we'd ever had. I decided to have the photo professionally printed and framed. The frame itself was simple but elegant, purchased on sale for $18. I spent another $5 on a small engraved plate that read, "Remember the simple moments." The total came to $23, well within budget but thoughtful and personal. The office Christmas party arrived on a Friday afternoon, the conference room transformed with decorations and a potluck spread that smelled amazing. Everyone gathered around the gift table, excited chatter filling the space as we prepared for the Secret Santa exchange. I'd wrapped Jessica's gift carefully in silver paper with a white ribbon, pleased with how nice it looked despite the modest cost. The exchange worked by random draw. Our office manager pulled names from a hat, and each person came forward to receive their gift and open it in front of everyone. It was meant to be fun, a way to build camaraderie, though it always made me slightly nervous to have all eyes watching. I sat toward the back, my hands clutched around a cup of punch, watching as colleagues opened their presents. There was laughter, genuine appreciation, and the warm atmosphere of people genuinely enjoying each other's company. Then Jessica's name was called. She bounced to the front with her usual confidence, her designer dress and perfectly styled hair, making her look like she was attending a gala rather than an office party. She picked up the silver-wrapped package, my package, and I felt my heart rate increase. Jessica tore through the wrapping paper with enthusiasm, her manicured nails making quick work of the tape. When she lifted the frame from the tissue paper, her expression shifted from excited to confused to something that looked uncomfortably like disappointment. The room had gone quiet, everyone waiting for her reaction. She stared at the framed photograph for a long moment, her smile becoming increasingly forced. "Oh," she said finally, her voice carrying across the silent room. "It's a picture." Our colleague Marcus, standing nearby, leaned over to look. "That's from the retreat last year, right?" "That's a nice memory." Jessica's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "I guess. Though honestly, this seems pretty cheap for Secret Santa. I mean, anyone could print a photo at the drugstore for like $3. Whoever got me clearly didn't put much thought or money into this." The words hit me like physical blows. Heat flooded my face, and I felt my hands start trembling. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably. A few faces showed sympathy, others awkwardness. But Jessica continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension she'd created. I was hoping for something nice, you know? Something actually worth unwrapping. This is just disappointing. I sat frozen in my chair, trying desperately to keep my expression neutral while humiliation burned through my chest. The gift I'd spent 2 weeks planning, the thoughtful gesture meant to show I'd actually listened to her stories, had been dismissed as cheap and thoughtless in front of our entire department. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. I would not cry at the office Christmas party. I would not give Jessica the satisfaction of knowing how deeply her words had cut. The gift exchange continued, but I barely registered what was happening. Names were called, presents opened, but everything felt distant and muffled, like I was underwater. My own Secret Santa gift sat unopened in my lap, though I couldn't remember who'd given it to me or when I'd received it. All I could focus on was Jessica's voice echoing in my head. Cheap. Disappointing. Not worth unwrapping. When Jessica received her actual Secret Santa gift moments later, her delighted shriek snapped me back to reality. She pulled a high-end designer handbag from an enormous gift box, squealing about how perfect it was, and immediately checking the brand label. Now this is what I'm talking about, she announced triumphantly. Someone actually knows quality. I excused myself quietly and retreated to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall and finally letting the tears fall. The humiliation was crushing, made worse by the public nature of Jessica's dismissal. Everyone had witnessed her contempt for my gift, her casual cruelty wrapped in the guise of honesty. I'd try to do something thoughtful, to show that I'd paid attention to who she was beyond the designer labels and expensive tastes. Instead, I'd been made to feel small, poor, and stupid for even trying. After several minutes, I pulled myself together, wiping my eyes and fixing my makeup as best I could. When I emerged from the bathroom, the party was winding down. Colleagues were packing up leftover food and cleaning up wrapping paper. A few people gave me sympathetic looks, but nobody mentioned what had happened. I grabbed my coat and my unopened Secret Santa gift and headed for the door, desperate to escape. But our office manager, a kind woman named Patricia, caught my arm gently. The Secret Santa reveal is tomorrow, she reminded me quietly. When we announce who had who. You're still coming, right? I'd completely forgotten about the reveal tradition. Every year, the day after the exchange, we gathered for a casual breakfast where people could thank their Secret Santas personally. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with the unopened Secret Santa gift on my coffee table. My cat Whiskers curled up beside me, purring softly as I replayed the day's humiliation on an endless loop in my mind. Jessica's dismissive words. The uncomfortable silence. The way she'd gushed over her expensive handbag while my thoughtful gift sat abandoned on the table. I finally opened my own Secret Santa gift, finding a lovely scented candle set and a handwritten note from someone in accounting I barely knew. The thoughtfulness of their gift made Jessica's reaction to mine hurt even more. They'd clearly put care into selecting something I'd enjoy, just as I'd done for Jessica. But unlike her, I would actually appreciate and use what I'd received. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams filled with anxiety about the next day's reveal. Part of me wanted to call in sick, to avoid the moment when everyone would learn I'd been Jessica's Secret Santa. But another part of me, a part one didn't entirely recognize, wanted to be there. Wanted to see her face when she realized exactly whose gift she'd mocked so publicly. By morning, my hurt had transformed into something else. Not quite anger, but a quiet determination to handle this situation with grace and dignity. The Friday morning breakfast was casual, with bagels and coffee in the break room instead of our usual conference room setup. People milled around in jeans and comfortable sweaters, the relaxed end-of-week atmosphere a stark contrast to yesterday's formal party. I arrived deliberately late, pouring myself coffee and standing near the back of the room. Patricia called everyone to attention, explaining that she'd now revealed the Secret Santa pairings so people could properly thank their gift givers. Names were announced in alphabetical order, and I watched as colleagues hugged and laughed, expressing genuine gratitude for their presence. My heart rate increased as we moved through the list, getting closer to the H's. Then Patricia's voice rang out clearly. Jessica Hartley received gifts from Anna Morrison. The room fell absolutely silent. Every eye turned toward me, then toward Jessica, whose face had gone completely pale. I saw the exact moment the realization hit her, the memory of her cruel words yesterday crashing into the current revelation that I had been her secret Santa all along. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Someone coughed awkwardly. I set down my coffee cup carefully, my hands surprisingly steady, and walked to the front of the room. The walk from the back of the break room to where Jessica stood felt impossibly long. Every face I passed showed a mixture of curiosity, sympathy, and anticipation for what would happen next. Jessica's usual confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by visible discomfort and what might have been the beginning of shame. I stopped a few feet from her, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since yesterday's exchange. "Hi, Jessica," I said quietly. My voice was calm, steady, not betraying the storm of emotions churning inside me. "I was your secret Santa." She swallowed hard, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the flush creeping up her neck. "Anna, I didn't realize." "I know," I interrupted gently. "You didn't know it was for me when you called it cheap and disappointing yesterday. When you said whoever gave it to you clearly didn't put much thought into it." The room was so quiet I could hear the coffee maker gurgling in the corner. People weren't even pretending not to stare anymore. This was the moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating since last night. I could be petty, could throw her words back at her, and humiliate her the way she'd humiliated me. But something in her genuinely uncomfortable expression stopped me. Instead of attacking, I took a breath and spoke from my heart. "I spent 2 weeks trying to find the perfect gift for you, Jessica. With the $25 limit, I couldn't afford the designer things you usually love. So, I tried to think of something meaningful instead." I could see her eyes starting to glisten, but I continued, my voice gentle rather than accusatory. "I remembered that day at the retreat last year. The kayaking trip. You talked about your grandmother's lake house, about how much those simple summer days meant to you. You seemed so happy and genuine that day. I wanted to capture that moment, to remind you of a time when you weren't worried about labels or price tags, just enjoying life." Jessica's hand flew to her mouth, and I saw actual tears forming in her eyes. Around the room, people's expressions had softened. This wasn't going the way anyone had expected. "The frame cost $18, I continued quietly. "The engraving plate was $5. I stayed within budget. But more importantly, I put thought into it. I tried to give you something that showed I'd actually listened to you, that I saw you as more than just the person who wears designer clothes and drives a nice car." The silence in the break room was absolute. Jessica's tears were falling freely now, her mascara creating dark tracks down her cheeks. She looked devastated, and I found myself feeling an unexpected sympathy for her despite my own hurt. "The value of a gift isn't in its price tag," I said, addressing the whole room now rather than just Jessica. "It's in the thought behind it, in the connection it represents. I learned that from my grandmother, who never had much money but always made me feel incredibly loved with her handmade presents." Patricia was wiping her own eyes. Several other colleagues nodded, clearly moved by my words. I turned back to Jessica, who was still standing frozen, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry my gift disappointed you," I said softly. "But I'm not sorry for the thought I put into it. That photo represented a real moment, a genuine connection. And that, to me, is priceless." For a long moment, Jessica just stared at me, clearly struggling with emotions she wasn't used to displaying publicly. Then, to everyone's shock including my own, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug, her body shaking with sobs against my shoulder. Jessica's embrace caught me completely off guard. For several seconds, I stood rigid, unsure how to respond. Then, almost instinctively, my arms came up and hugged her back. She was crying hard now, her expensive perfume mixing with the smell of coffee and bagels as the entire office watched this unexpected moment unfold. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I'm so sorry. You're right about everything. I was awful and cruel, and I didn't even think about how my words would hurt you. When she finally pulled back, her makeup was ruined and her eyes were red, but she looked more real than I'd ever seen her. The polished facade had cracked completely, revealing someone vulnerable and genuinely remorseful underneath. I've been so focused on material things, she continued, her voice shaky but determined to speak in front of everyone. On showing off and proving I'm successful. But you actually listened to me. You remembered a conversation from a year ago. You tried to connect with the real me, not the version I show off at work. She picked up the framed photo from where it still sat on the gift table, looking at it properly for the first time. This is beautiful, she said softly. And you're right. That was one of the happiest days I've had in years. The atmosphere in the break room had completely transformed. What had started as an awkward, tense moment had become something unexpectedly touching. People were no longer watching with anticipation for drama, but with genuine emotion at this display of vulnerability and reconciliation. Patricia cleared her throat gently. I think we should probably continue with the rest of the announcements. Jessica nodded, wiping her eyes with a napkin someone handed her. But before I could return to my spot in the back, she caught my hand. Can we talk later? Privately, she asked. I owe you a real apology, not just this public emotional breakdown. I squeezed her hand briefly. Of course. The rest of the Secret Santa reveal proceeded normally, though I noticed people seemed more thoughtful in their thank yous, more focused on the sentiment behind gifts rather than just their material value. My small moment of honesty had apparently resonated with more people than just Jessica. When the gathering ended and people started drifting back to their desks, several colleagues approached me with quiet words of support. That was really graceful, Marcus told me. The way you handled that situation. A lot of people would have torn into her. I shrugged, suddenly feeling exhausted. Hurting her back wouldn't have made me feel better. Jessica found me in my cubicle around lunchtime. She'd fixed her makeup and pulled herself together, but her eyes were still slightly red. Can we grab coffee? She asked. There's a place down the street. My treat. We walked to the coffee shop in silence, the December cold biting at our faces. Inside, the warmth and smell of espresso provided a welcome contrast. Jessica ordered us both expensive lattes and found a quiet corner table away from other customers. I need to properly apologize, she started, wrapping her hands around her cup. What I said yesterday was inexcusable. I hurt you publicly, and I did it without even thinking about it. That says something really ugly about who I've become. I sipped my latte, letting her continue. She needed to get this out. I grew up poor, Jessica said, surprising me completely. Really poor. Like, wondering if we'd have electricity this month poor. I swore that when I grew up, I'd never feel that way again. I'd have nice things, live in a nice place, show everyone I'd made it. Her voice cracked slightly. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that people matter more than things. I started measuring everything by price tags, including apparently the thoughtfulness of gifts from coworkers who were trying to be kind to me. Jessica's confession explained so much about her behavior, though it didn't excuse it. I found myself seeing her in an entirely different light, understanding the insecurity that drove her constant need to display wealth and success. That photo you gave me, she continued, pulling it from her bag. She'd been carrying it with her. When you talked about the lake house and my grandmother, you touched on something I haven't thought about in years. Those summers were the only time I felt genuinely happy as a kid. We didn't have money, but we had time together, and joy, and simplicity. She traced the edge of the frame with one finger. My grandmother died 5 years ago. I was so busy climbing the corporate ladder that I missed her final months. I didn't even go to see her because I was working on some stupid presentation that didn't matter at all in the long run. Tears were forming in her eyes again. This photo captures who I was before I forgot what actually matters. Before I became this person who measures worth in dollar signs and judges people for not meeting my materialistic standards. I reached across the table and took her hand. You can change, Jessica. You don't have to keep being that person. We talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing more naturally than any interaction we'd ever had at work. Jessica opened up about her struggles with imposter syndrome, her fear that people would discover she didn't really belong in her expensive lifestyle. I shared my own insecurities about money and feeling inadequate around colleagues who seemed so financially comfortable. "I've been jealous of you, actually," Jessica admitted, surprising me completely. "You seem so content with your life. You're not constantly chasing the next expensive thing or trying to prove something. You just exist peacefully, and I've envied that." I laughed, though not unkindly. "I've definitely envied your financial security. But you're right that I try to find contentment in what I have. It's not always easy, but it's better than constantly feeling like I need more to be happy." When we finally left the coffee shop, something had fundamentally shifted between us. We weren't exactly friends yet, but we'd moved past being mere coworkers occupying different social spheres. We'd connected on a human level, which felt significant. Back at the office, I noticed people watching us walk in together, clearly curious about what had transpired. Jessica caught my eye and smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usual polished appearance into something warmer. The following Monday, I arrived at work to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a beautiful leather journal with my initials embossed on the cover and a handwritten note from Jessica. "Anna, I wanted to get you something to say thank you for your grace and kindness. But I realized that would be falling into my old pattern of thinking expensive gifts solve problems. So instead, I'm writing this note to tell you that your gift to me was the most valuable present I've received in years. Not because of what it cost, but because of what it meant. You saw me, the real me, and tried to connect with that person. That's priceless. The journal is just so you have something to write in. I hope you'll use it to record the moments that matter, the way you help me remember to value moments over money. With genuine gratitude and friendship, Jessica." I read the note 3 times, touched by the sincerity and self-awareness it showed. The journal itself was clearly expensive, probably well over the Secret Santa limit, but I understood why she'd given it. This was her way of showing she'd heard me, that she was trying to change her perspective on what had value. Over the next few weeks, I watched Jessica make subtle but noticeable changes. She still wore nice clothes and drove her luxury car, but she stopped making such a show of her purchases. She started actually listening in conversations instead of waiting for her turn to talk about herself. At lunch one day, she joined a group of us who usually brought homemade food instead of ordering expensive takeout. "I used to think this was beneath me," she admitted, unpacking a simple sandwich. "But honestly, this is nicer than eating alone at some overpriced restaurant." The group welcomed her warmly, and I saw genuine surprise and pleasure on her face at being included so easily. She'd built walls around herself with her materialism, not realizing how those same walls kept meaningful connections out. Our office manager, Patricia, pulled me aside one afternoon. "I don't know what you said to Jessica, but the change is remarkable. She's been more collegial, more team-oriented. She even volunteered to mentor the new intern, something she's never shown interest in before." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the credit. I think she was ready to change. I just happened to be there when she realized it. But Patricia shook her head. "You showed her grace when you could have humiliated her. That's a powerful thing." The real test of Jessica's transformation came a month later when our department held a potluck celebration. Jessica showed up with homemade cookies, clearly baked herself rather than purchased from an expensive bakery. "They're probably not great," she admitted as she set them on the table. "I haven't baked since I was a kid, but I wanted to contribute something I actually made." People tried the cookies and offered genuine compliments. They were good, if a bit imperfect, but the imperfections somehow made them more endearing. Jessica beamed at the positive feedback, looking more genuinely happy than I'd ever seen her. Later, she found me near the dessert table. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For the gift, for your grace afterward, for showing me there's a different way to live." I smiled. "You're doing the work yourself. I just gave you a different perspective." "Still," she insisted, That gift was exactly what I needed, even if I didn't know it at the time. Sometimes the most valuable things don't come with price tags. As she walked away to join a group of colleagues, I reflected on how a simple Secret Santa exchange had led to such an unexpected transformation. Not just in Jessica, but in how our entire office seemed to interact differently now. The change in office dynamics was subtle but real. People seemed more thoughtful in their interactions, more willing to look beyond surface appearances. The culture shift wasn't just about Jessica's transformation, but about what everyone had witnessed in that break room moment when vulnerability and grace had trumped materialism and pride. I continued using the journal Jessica had given me, filling it with observations and reflections. Writing helped me process not just what had happened, but what it meant about kindness, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to be vulnerable. One entry read, "Today I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is show someone their reflection without judgment." Jessica saw herself through my gift and my response to her cruelty, and that reflection inspired change. But I also saw myself more clearly, understanding that my own worth isn't determined by what I can afford to give or how others receive my gestures. Jessica and I developed a genuine friendship over the following months. We were very different people with different priorities, but we'd connected on something deeper than our surface differences. She helped me understand that success and nice things weren't inherently wrong, while I reminded her that happiness couldn't be purchased. 6 months after the Secret Santa incident, Jessica invited me to dinner at her condo. I'd been curious about her living space, having heard her mention it countless times at work. The condo was beautiful and expensively decorated, but what struck me most was the framed photo from the retreat, now prominently displayed on her living room bookshelf. "That's the first thing people ask about," Jessica said, noticing my gaze. "They expect some expensive art piece, and instead there's a photo from a work retreat. But I tell them it's my most treasured possession because it reminds me of who I really am underneath all the stuff." We cooked dinner together, Jessica admitting she'd been taking cooking classes. "It's weirdly therapeutic," she said, chopping vegetables with focused concentration. "And way cheaper than eating out all the time. Plus, I actually enjoy it." Who knew? Over pasta and wine, we talked about everything from work drama to life goals to childhood memories. Jessica shared more about her grandmother and those summers at the lake house, her voice soft with nostalgia. "I've been thinking about buying a small cabin," she admitted. "Nothing fancy, just a simple place by a lake. Somewhere I can disconnect from all the material pressure and just exist." The irony wasn't lost on either of us, and we both laughed. As Christmas approached again, our office prepared for another Secret Santa exchange. The energy was different this year, less focused on the potential value of gifts and more on the thoughtfulness behind them. Patricia announced some new guidelines. "This year, we're encouraging handmade gifts or experiences, or anything that shows you've paid attention to your person. Let's focus on connection over consumption." I saw Jessica smile at that announcement, and she caught my eye across the room with a knowing look. We'd both influenced this shift, though neither of us had actively campaigned for it. Sometimes change happens organically when people witness authentic transformation. I was assigned Marcus this year, a colleague who loved terrible puns. I spent my evenings creating a hand-drawn comic book featuring Marcus and his legendary workplace dad jokes, complete with colorful illustrations and speech bubbles. The cost was minimal, just art supplies I already owned, but the time and thought invested made it valuable. Jessica was assigned to someone from accounting and spent weeks learning to knit, so she could make a custom scarf in their favorite colors. "I'm terrible at this," she laughed, showing me her tangled yarn one afternoon. "But it's actually fun to create something with my own hands instead of just swiping a credit card." The second Secret Santa exchange was completely different from the first. People opened handmade gifts, personalized photo albums, baked goods wrapped in pretty packages, and experience vouchers for coffee dates or museum trips. The focus had genuinely shifted from material value to meaningful connection. When Marcus opened my comic book, his delighted laughter filled the room. "This is amazing. Look," she even included the terrible coffee machine joke from last month. The accounting colleague who received Jessica's handmade scarf actually cried, touched by the time and effort invested in creating something custom. "I can't believe you learned to knit just to make this," she said, hugging Jessica tightly. "This is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received." Watching the exchange, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because I'd somehow won or proven a point, but because genuine thoughtfulness had replaced performative materialism. The lesson from last year's painful incident had blossomed into something beautiful. After the exchange, Jessica and I walked to our cars together through the December evening. Snow was falling softly, creating a peaceful atmosphere that matched our reflective moods. "Thank you for last year," Jessica said suddenly. "For the gift that I didn't deserve and the grace you showed when I was awful about it." I stopped walking and turned to face Jessica, the parking lot lights reflecting off the falling snow. "You know what I learned from all of this?" I asked. "That sometimes the most valuable gifts aren't the ones we give to others, but the ones we receive when we least expect them." Jessica looked confused, so I continued. "Your reaction to my gift hurt me deeply at first. But it also gave me an opportunity to choose grace over revenge, kindness over bitterness. That choice changed me as much as it changed you. You gave me the chance to discover strength I didn't know I had." Jessica's eyes filled with tears, something that happened more easily now than it had a year ago. "I never thought of it that way. I was so focused on my own transformation that I didn't realize you'd grown too." We hugged in the snowy parking lot, two women who'd started as distant coworkers and become genuine friends through an unlikely series of events triggered by a Secret Santa gift. As we separated and headed to our respective cars, I reflected on the journey we'd both taken. Jessica had learned that worth couldn't be measured in dollars and that authentic connection mattered more than material possessions. I'd learned that grace and vulnerability could transform situations and people in ways that aggression and defensiveness never could. A year and a half after that first painful Secret Santa exchange, I sat in my apartment with Jessica, helping her plan her lake house purchase. She'd found a modest cabin that reminded her of her grandmother's place, and the excitement in her voice was genuine and infectious. "It's not fancy," she said, showing me photos on her phone. "No granite countertops or designer fixtures. Just a simple place with a dock and a view. Perfect for reconnecting with what actually matters." I smiled at her transformed perspective. The woman who'd once dismissed my thoughtful gift as too cheap now treasured simplicity over luxury, connection over consumption. My own life had changed too. The confidence I'd gained from choosing grace over bitterness had spilled into other areas. I'd started speaking up more in meetings, pursuing opportunities one would have previously considered beyond my reach. The journal Jessica gave me was filled with reflections on growth, kindness, and the power of choosing how we respond to hurt. As Jessica left that evening, I pulled out the framed photo from the retreat, the one she'd initially rejected. I'd asked if I could keep it after she'd gotten a copy made for herself, and it now sat on my own bookshelf. It reminded me that sometimes the most important gifts are the ones that hurt at first, that challenge us, that force us to examine who we are and who we want to be. The lesson wasn't about the monetary value of gifts. It was about the priceless value of choosing kindness, extending grace, and believing that people can change when given the chance and shown a better way forward.